Everybody. This is Miss Rachel and Miss Heather from the Hagerstown Public Library, and we're here for what is it, the
Seventh week.
seventh mythology class. We've got one more next week. So, so we're almost done, which is kind of sad. But we did, for those of you who haven't been here for the whole thing, we did 2 of Greek mythology. Then we did 3 of Egyptian, and then this is our second week in Roman, and then we have kind of like a review catch-up week sort of deal next week. We're not exactly sure what we're going to do with that, but we'll probably go over some things and I don't know, maybe share a couple news stories or something. But yeah, so real quick, I wanted to say if you have not signed up for summer reading, today is pretty much your last day to do that. We have a program with we're having penguins come to the library on Saturday at 11, I believe is when that starts, but it's only for people who have signed up for summer reading. So if you want to come to that, you'll need to sign up. So today's pretty much your last day to do that. But for those of you who have signed up, at the end of this program we've got a code word that we'll share with you guys and you'll get credit for this program. So, what else we need to add? Anything else?
If you have anything, I know last week we talked about, for the last week is like a review week. If you have any questions or have any stories you want us to read or something that you liked that we maybe missed or whatever, I know there's a couple of you out there that are big mythology geeks like we are. Let us know. Call in, email, send us a message on here after we're done or while we're doing it, and we'll do our best we can to accommodate you and your answers and your questions and even find a different story if you want to hear that. So just let us know. Gives us a little bit more of substance for next week.
And I know this is a little late since we've only got a couple weeks left, but we do have set up where we can see the comments as we're working. So if we ever are talking about something and we don't explain it or you don't understand and you have a question, feel free to ask us. We'll do our best to answer it. If we can't answer it, then I guess we'll figure it out. Google it. Google's amazing. Yep. But so if you guys ever have any questions, don't hesitate to comment. But yeah, so like we said, we've got our last week of Roman here. And we've got some info on like the Roman culture. There's some really cool things Heather found. We also have some information on the Underworld. We've not really talked about that a whole lot. When we did Greek, because Greek and Roman mythology is very similar for those of you who haven't listened to any of this before. The Romans basically came in and took over the Greeks, and so they adopted a lot of their religion and mythology and stuff. So they changed the names of most of the gods and adapted a couple of the stories and made a couple of their own. Yep. But a lot of them are pretty much the same. So Greek is more popular than Roman mythology. So when you go to, like, if you're looking something up, more often than not, some Greek will pop up. So it was kind of hard for us to find some Roman things, but
we dug deep and found a Roman treasure chest of things.
Yeah, we found a website that's got some different myths and stuff on it. But yeah, so we've got some information on the Underworld, some Roman history, a couple other odds and ends. But yeah, anything else we need to add before we get started?
I would say, with the Greek and Roman, they did not, celebrate, the coming of night and day or the Underworld as much as the Egyptians. So that was a very big difference. There's very minimal things on the Underworld that they did and talked about. They just talked about the different aspects of it, but it wasn't celebrated and a big to-do as much as the Egyptian culture.
Yeah.
So.
Okay. You want to read that first part or you want me to?
Yeah, I'll go ahead and read it, and then we'll just kind of take turns like we have. And if you guys have any questions, don't be afraid to comment on here. Like, we'll try and look at them. Her and I will take turns, and then if you have something or comment or a statement, type away, put it on there. We'll try and answer it. All right, let's get going. So, I'm going to show you this real quick. So, this is a map. I'm still getting used to things. Of ancient Rome and basically Italy right now and where they were at. Okay? That's a good visual because I know some people have visuals. So, ancient Rome was a powerful and important civilization that ruled much of Europe for nearly 1,000 years. The culture of ancient Rome was spread throughout Europe during its rule. As a result, Rome's culture still has an impact on the Western world today. The basis for much of Western culture comes from the ancient Rome, especially in areas such as government, engineering, architecture, language, and literature. So, the Roman Republic. The Rome first grew into power as a republic. This meant that Rome's leaders, such as senators, were elected officials that served for a limited amount of time, not kings who were born into leadership and ruled their life. For life. They had a complex government with written laws, a constitution, and a balance of powers. These concepts became very important in forming future democratic governments like the United States. The republic would rule Rome for hundreds of years from around 509 BC to 45 BC. The Roman Empire. In 45 BC, Julius Caesar, which he's like one of the most famous. There's been books written around him. Shakespeare's done stuff with Caesar.
Yeah.
Everything. There's so much information.
Definitely probably one of the most popular.
Yep. Julius Caesar took over the Roman Republic and made him the supreme dictator. This was the end of the Republic. A few years later, in 27 BC, Caesar Augustus became the first Roman emperor, and this was the start of the Roman Empire. Much of the lower government levels stayed the same, but now the emperor had supreme power. So this is, it's called the Roman Forum, was the center of government. So it's kind of like, a lot of DC, the U.S. Capitol, basically, DC, has modeled our government and our architecture and everything. We have taken a lot from Rome and ancient Greece, structure-wise and political-wise, and a lot of different other things we have got from Rome. And that's original to what their governmental area looked like and was, and that's still standing today. So that's kind of a testament of their building and their architecture skills. So
Pretty impressive for the day.
Yeah.
I mean, even for now, but like especially in that day and time, it was really impressive.
You never knew. Yeah. It's not like they had, indications for weather or earthquake or anything. You just never knew. So for that to stand the test of time is historic itself.
Yeah.
So the empire splits. As the Roman Empire grew, it became more and more difficult to manage from the city of Rome. Eventually, the Roman leaders decided to split Rome into two empires. One was the Western Roman Empire and was ruled out of the city of Rome. The other was Eastern Roman Empire and was ruled out of Constantinople, today's Istanbul in Turkey. The Eastern Roman Empire would become known as Byzantium, or the Byzantine Empire. So this is last part of this is the fall of Rome. The fall of Rome generally refers to the fall of Western Roman Empire. It fell in 476 AD. The Eastern Roman Empire, or the Byzantine Empire, would rule parts of Eastern Europe for another 1,000 years. So the Eastern had a lot more to it in terms of ruling and government stuff is what it seems like. Fun facts about ancient Rome. The city of Rome is the capital of Italy today. It sits on the same site as the city of ancient Rome. If you were to visit Rome, you could see many of the original ancient buildings, such as the Colosseum and the Roman Forum. So that picture, this is original to the capital of Rome. That's still standing today, and that's something you can physically go see, and I'm sure there's a way you could virtually tour it right now. Rome and East European places are doing free virtual tours since tourism cannot happen right now with COVID. Kind of like how we're adapting Mythology Class for virtual.
Yep, pretty cool.
Yeah. Let's see. The Circus Maximus, a huge stadium built for chariot races, could seat around 150,000 people. The fall of Western Rome is considered the start of the Dark Ages in Europe. The highest position in the Roman Republic was the consul. There were two consuls at the time to make sure that one didn't become too powerful. So that's kind of like the Senate and the House. One can't rule over the other, but they have to do checks and balances in our government today.
Keep them in check.
Yep. Let's see. The native language of Romans was Latin, but they often spoke Greek as well. So with them combining and the Romans taking over the Greeks and them spreading out so far, Latin is their common ground language, but also Greek would be as well. So it wasn't uncommon for them to use both languages and be schooled in different languages of the area and the empire they have conquered. Let's see. And then when Julius Caesar took power, he named himself dictator for life. However, this didn't last long as he was assassinated a year later.
Yeah.
And one of his confidants and a bunch of people in his government assassinated him, supposedly. That's the history. So
yeah, the Romans were pretty cruel people. They were,
they were bloodthirsty.
Very, very much so. And we'll get into a little bit more of that later. But yeah, they liked their violence.
Yes.
Okay, so there's some information here. It's a typical day in the life of a Roman.
Mm-hmm.
So it's like pretty cool. But okay, a typical Roman day would start off with a light breakfast, then off to work. Work would end in the early afternoon when many Romans would take a quick trip to the baths to bathe and socialize. I wanted to elaborate on this. For those of you who don't know, the Romans did this thing. It's basically like they had these big pools in these buildings, and it's like group bath time, which I know sounds really weird to all of us. Yeah. But they would basically have like this big, giant in-ground pool, and people would go and bathe and socialize. A lot of times there would be like servants or slaves there to help, I don't know, get like
take care of needs.
Yeah, like reach their backs if they couldn't, or get towels, just do whatever, provide them with snacks, that kind of thing. But it was like, that was the place to socialize because it was nice and cool down there in the pools.
Mm-hmm.
But so I know that sounds really weird, and I don't think I would ever want to do it, but I just wanted to elaborate because that sentence sounded really weird if you don't know that.
It kind of was like the place to get your gossip, get a relaxed day, and it was more like going to a swimming pool in modern day times. Like you go to the pool to hang out.
Yeah,
that's how they did it, but they also bathed. So
yeah,
we don't do that at modern times,
no.
except for at our own homes, hopefully.
Yeah. Okay, so at around 3 p.m. they would have a dinner, which was as much of a social event as a meal. And then some of the ancient Roman jobs. Ancient Rome was a complex society that required a number of different job functions and skills to function. Most of the menial tasks were performed by slaves. Here are some of the jobs a Roman citizen might have. There's the farmer. Most of the Romans who lived in the countryside were farmers. The most common crop was wheat, which was used to make bread. And then there were the soldiers. The Roman army was large and needed soldiers. The army was a way for the poorer class to earn a regular wage and to gain some valuable land at the end of their service. It was a good way for the poor to move up in status. So, like it says, gain land. A lot of times if you served like a certain number of years, I don't know what it was, maybe 15, 20 probably. Like, it was a long time.
Off, like, if Greek time and Roman times in that period, it is said that like the Roman boys or the Greek boys, whatever, I have to be correct. I'll have to correct myself later, but they would be pretty much taken away from their moms at like 6 years old and trained for how many years, and then have to be. We talked about it in Greek actually.
Yeah.
Taken away for so many years, train in the army, fight whatever, and then they get to come home, and then finally they get to like do what they want to do after doing their military duties.
Yeah, so I mean, like, it was a big deal. But yeah, so like after they served for however many, it was usually like
10, 15
years at least, yeah. And then they would be given like maybe a small plot of land to build their own house and have their own family, that kind of thing. So it's just like a thank you gift kind of thing. So that's what that means. And then there was the merchant. Merchants of all sorts sold and bought items from around the empire. They kept the economy rolling and the empire rich. And we have the craftsmen. From making dishes and pots to crafting fine jewelry and weapons for the army, craftsmen were important to the empire. Some craftsmen worked in individual shops and learned a specific craft, others from their father. Others were slaves who worked in large workshops that produced items in large quantities such as dishes or pots. Then we have the entertainers. The people of ancient Rome liked to be entertained. Just like today, there were a number of entertainers in Rome, including musicians, dancers, actors, chariot racers, and gladiators. Then we have the lawyers, teachers, and engineers. The more educated Romans could become lawyers, teachers, and engineers. So, I mean, you guys know what all those are. And then we have the government. The government of ancient Rome was huge. There were all sorts of government jobs, from tax collectors and clerks to high-ranking positions like senators. The senators were the wealthy and the powerful. Senators served in their position for life, and at times there were as many as 600 members of the Senate. Can you imagine trying to vote on something? Everybody had their own opinion with 600 people? That would take forever. That's just my personal opinion on that. That would take forever.
Yep.
Okay, and then we have the family. So this is what a typical Roman family looked like. The family unit was very important to the Romans. The head of the family was the father, called the paterfamilias. That's what I'm going with.
That is what it is.
Okay, that was a good guess on my part. Legally, he had all the power in the family. However, usually the wife had a strong say in what went on in the family. She often handled the finances and managed the household. And then we have school. Roman children started school at the age of 7. Wealthy children would be taught by a full-time tutor. Other children went to public school. They studied subjects such as reading, writing, math, literature, and debate. School was mostly for boys. However, some wealthy girls were tutored at home. Poor children did not get to go to school. It shows a picture of a Roman toy here. I don't know how well you guys can see that, but it's almost like a little
Pull along.
Yeah, it's almost like a horse with wheels sort of deal. Yeah, I don't know. And then we have food. Most Romans ate a light breakfast and little food throughout the day. Then they would have a large dinner. Excuse me. Dinner was a major event starting at around 3 in the afternoon. They would lie on their sides on a couch and be served by the servants. They ate with their hands and would rinse their hands in water often during the meal. Typical food would have been bread, beans, fish, vegetables, cheese, and dried fruit. They ate little meat. The rich would have a variety of foods and fancy sauces. How the food looked was just as important as the taste. Some of the food they ate would seem very strange to us, such as mice and peacock tongues. I personally don't know that I would eat either of those, but apparently the Romans liked them. And then the last section we have here is clothing. The toga. The toga was a long robe made up of several yards of material. The wealthy wore white togas made from wool or linen, which would be very hot, by the way.
Yeah.
Like,
Linen wouldn't be so bad, but wool would be hot, thick, and just itch.
Yeah. Yeah. Some colors and markings on togas were reserved for certain people and certain occasions. For example, a toga with a purple border was worn by high-ranking senators and consuls, while a black toga was worn generally only during times of mourning. The toga was uncomfortable and hard to wear, and generally only worn out in public, not around the house. In later years, the toga grew out of style, and most people wore a tunic with a cloak when it was cold. And then they got the tunic. The tunic was more like a long shirt. Tunics were worn by the rich around the house and under their togas. They were the regular dress for the poor. So it was like the poor people didn't really have togas because it's like for the wealthy people, I guess. But yeah. So that's like some basic info on like a typical day for Romans.
Yeah. So one of the things that I mentioned, we talked about how the Romans would go into the military and come back and gain land. It's kind of like what they did after World War II is they had the GI Bill, and they gave you so much money. They would pay for your college. They would give you so much money for a house or property or something like that to invest back in the economy to boost everything. So that's kind of reminds me of, the GI Bill after World War II with the whole military giving property or schooling, whatever. So that's a good kind of basis on how our government has taken things from ancient times, basically, and made it more modern and elaborated on it.
Mostly just a big thank you kind of thing.
Yep. Yeah. Okay. The next thing we are going to talk about is like the religion in Underworld. We're going to talk about the different parts of Underworld and how that kind of went along. So Miss Rachel is pretty excited about this. So I'm going to read this first part, and then she's going to read a couple different things. Let's get going. So the Underworld. In today's time, when we think of the Underworld, we think of hell. However, the Romans' view of the Underworld was the home of both good and bad souls. The Underworld is a hidden kingdom for the dead and ruler Hades, or Jupiter? No,
Pluto.
Pluto. My bad. Pluto.
Yeah, Pluto is the Roman version. Hades is the Greek.
Pluto. See, this is where it says Rome, but they have it as Greek names.
Yeah.
So, my bad. Upon death, a soul is led by Hermes, which I think that was Mars in Roman.
Mars was Ares, the god of war.
Yeah.
I'm not sure who Hermes is.
Oh, goodness.
Messenger god.
Yep. So, to the entrance of the Underworld and then carried across Acheron. There is a single ferry run by Karon, to take the souls across the river. Only those who can pay the fare, with coins placed on their lips when buried, receive passage. The rest are trapped between the two worlds. The souls then enter through the gates. Cerberus allows to enter but none to leave. The souls then appear before a panel of 3 judges, Romulus, Minos, and Echius, who passed sentence. The Underworld was believed to divide it into different parts. Gate of Geese, Region of Waters, Field of Mornings, Tartarus, Land of Joy, Lys River, the Gate of Ivory, and the Gate of Sleep. So,
real quick, I just want to say, for those of you who don't know, Cerberus was the 3-headed, basically a guard dog, but he was like this huge dog, and he had 3 heads, and he would let anybody go in to the Underworld, but he wouldn't let people come out. And like if you hear myths, like I believe it was Hercules had to go to the Underworld, grab something, and come back.
Yep.
He was able to like trick Cerberus or
he lured with
play with him or
something.
did something.
Yep.
Yeah.
I think he had him go to sleep or something.
Yeah, he was able. I can't remember exactly how it was, but he was able to get back past him. And there are a couple of myths like that, but for the most part, once you were then in the Underworld, you were stuck.
Yep,
So,
you weren't supposed to get out. You were supposed to stay where you were unless you had something up your sleeve.
yeah.
So, the Gate of Dis. Enter through the Gate of Dis. Dis means Hades or Hell. Region of Waters. Once through the Gate of Dis is a river where the spirits have to cross to enter the Underworld. The river has many names, but the most popular were Styx or Acheron. Spirits of the dead are delivered across the river by ferrymen, but some spirits refused passage and must remain on the bank of the river. These spirits remain on the riverbank and are not able to get across because their souls have not received a proper burial. So they didn't get a coin or it wasn't done properly, so they weren't able to cross in.
Yeah, when people died, some stories say like under their tongue, or some will just say like in their lips. They have to put what they call drachmas. It was basically just a gold coin, and that was basically for their passageway. Like they had to pay the ferryman Karon to pay them to take them into the Underworld, basically. So it was like when people died, it was a big deal that they had to have a drachma. So even if you were like super poor, you had to get a drachma. Otherwise, your soul would just be wandering forever. Yeah, it's just So
when they say you have to pay the toll to Chiron or to the ferryman, that's what they mean.
Yeah.
And then in like Irish and other cultures, they would put 2 coins on your eye once your eyes are closed.
Yeah.
They would cover you with the coins. After banking at the other side of the river, the spirits of the recently deceased line up to face judgment. So this is called the Field of Mourning, where souls and casualties of war and those who died for love wander. The next is Tartarus, also called the Fortress of Place, or Torments, where the most evil of sinners went. Within the Tartarus is a deep pit where the tortures were supposed to be taking place. The most evil of sinners included those who sinned and rebelled towards the gods. So, still with the Romans, praying to the gods was a big thing. So if you rebelled against them or did something negative to them, you would be sent there and your death. Being disgraceful among men, those who hated their brethren, used their parents, or cheated their dependents, made no use of their riches, committed incest, disturbed a marriage union, rebellious, betrayers of their countries.
yeah, bad people basically. The worst of the worst, they would send to Tartarus, so to speak.
Yep. So there's the Land of the Joy, also known as the Place of the Blessed, Field of Gladness, Blessed Groves, or Homes of Peace. Here's where the good wanderers in peace and comfort. The good included those who died for their country, lived pure lives, truly inspired poets, inventors of arts, and all who had done good to mankind. In this beautiful region, their souls here were free to do as they please. The next one is Leith's River, flowed before the land of joy, where souls that are destined to live and the body again crowd the banks. After the cycle of 1,000 years, when the soul is pure of good, God calls onto them to drink from the river. Drinking from the river erases their memory so that their soul can start fresh in an earthly body. So it's kind of like reincarnation, is the premise of that, if you think about it in more of a modern view.
Yeah.
Let's see. The Gate of Ivory is disconnected from daily realities. False dreams are spoken of as coming through those of ivory. Excuse me. The Gate of Sleep, also known as the Gates of Horn. True dreams are spoken of as coming through the gates of sleep or horn. Excuse me. And Ananias traveled to Underworld. It is explained how important it is to abide by the Roman virtues if they want to internal happiness. The way one lives during their life very much determines their fate when they die. So it's kind of like, Christian belief. If you're a good person or whatever, and you're forgiven, you go to heaven. But if you're not, then you go down.
Yeah. So they had different rankings. Like the really good people would go to this part, really bad people would go to Tartarus, and then there were places in between that were like, oh, I was an okay person, so you get to go to this okay place, basically. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So. Okay. So we've got one more little bit with some information, then we got some myths and stuff for you. So I know sometimes all this information can be a little overwhelming. Okay, so let's see. This is talking about the River Styx, which is that main river that they talked about. And I don't know. Well, I'll read this first, and then if it doesn't cover it all, it's fine. Okay, Styx in Greek mythology, one of the rivers of the underworld. The word Styx literally means shuddering and expresses loathing of death. In Homer's Iliad and Odyssey, the gods swear by the water of the Styx as their most binding oath. According to Hesiod's Theogony?
Theogony.
Yeah. If a god perjured himself, he was rendered insensible for a year and then banished from the divine society for 9 years. Hesiod personified Styx as the daughter of Oceanus and the mother of
Emulation,
victory, power, and might. Perhaps because of its similarity to Hesiod's description in Theogony, the Styx later was identified with the stream now called Mavronary. I'm going with it. Greek means black water, near Nonacris in the Aronia Mountains near modern Solos in Arcadia. Whew.
You got a mouthful. I'm
Yeah.
so sorry.
There's a lot of big words in this. The ancients believed that the river's water was poisonous and would dissolve any vessel containing it except one made of the hoof of a horse or a donkey. There is a legend that Alexander the Great was poisoned by Styx water. In another legend, mentioned by the Roman poet Statius in 1st century AD, Thetis dipped her son Achilles into the Styx to render him invulnerable. Because she held him by his heel, he remained vulnerable there. So, I know that was a whole lot of mumbo-jumbo, but the River Styx, basically, it was one of those things, if you swore by it, maybe, say, if somebody asks you to do something on your deathbed, take care of my child, then if you, swore by the River Styx, you were basically bound to that. So if you broke that vow, horrible things would supposedly happen to you. I don't remember exactly, if there was a set thing or if it was just in general bad things. So, maybe you would die or you would have bad luck or you would go to Tartarus or something. It was not good. So if you, swore by the River Styx, that was a big deal.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then also, I don't know if you guys are familiar with the story or if you ever heard of the Achilles Heel. It's basically, for most people, if you, for any normal mortals, if you went into the River Styx, it was basically kind of like lava water in some things. You would basically, disintegrate or dissolve or something. You don't want to go swimming there. But then in some situations, I think it was depending on, your soul or your heart or something. If you're pure of heart or something, you could
You could go into it.
go into the River Styx, but then you would have one place that was vulnerable. Like here, her son Thetis dipped her son Achilles into the river to remain him invulnerable. So that means basically like say
Every
I was
part that was dipped deems you invulnerable.
yeah.
The part that wasn't dipped means that's where your weak point is. So
Yeah.
for Achilles, if it's okay if I
Yeah,
take
go
over.
for it.
I know what you're trying to say. It's just hard to get out.
Yeah, it's hard to explain sometimes.
So with Achilles, he was a great warrior and everything, but what did him in is since his mom did not get his full body, the back part of your heel on your foot, your Achilles heel, since she didn't get every part dipped in, that was left vulnerable. So his enemy struck him there, and that's what killed him.
Yeah.
So when they say, "Oh, you have an Achilles heel," well, that's your point of weakness.
Yeah. So it's like you could like say somebody stabbed me in the arm or something. Like you'd be fine.
Yeah.
It would heal really quickly or instantly or something like that.
Yeah.
But it's like if somebody stabbed me in the Achilles heel, then that would
You're done.
Yeah. And for those of you who have read like Percy Jackson, there was like Percy Jackson went and swam in the River Styx for some battle or something. And I think his vulnerable spot was like behind his ear or something. So I can't remember exactly where it was, but it wasn't his heel. So it's like you get to choose your vulnerable spot or something. So obviously you wouldn't want to do something like part of your arm because that part is super like out in the open.
Yes.
But you'd want to do something more hidden where people wouldn't like instantly try to get you. So that's just a little bit more on the River Styx. Anything else? Or
I think we kind of covered that, and you can move on to the
Okay.
next if you like.
And then next we've got Karon. Heather and I were talking before the class, and I've always heard it pronounced Karon. She's heard it pronounced Chiron. To me, Chiron was the centaur who was like the great, like wasn't he like a philosopher or I don't know, he
Prophesier.
prophesied or something. He was a centaur, a very wise guy. And I've heard that Charon, I mean, they're different, but I'm not exactly sure how it's pronounced. I've heard it Charon, she's heard Chiron. So, I don't know, but yeah.
I think it all, because I speak a little bit more hillbilly than she does. In the schools I went to, we speak a little bit more. So it all depends on your dialect of how
Yeah.
you say things and speak things. So, like here in Indiana, we say "worsh." Some people say "worsh." Some people say "wash." It just depends on how your dialect is
Yeah,
of
that's true.
Hoosier.
Yeah. Okay, so Charon, in Greek mythology, the son of Erebus and Nyx, knight, whose duty it was to ferry over the river Styx in Acheron, those souls of the deceased who had received the rites of burial. In payment, he received the coin that was placed in the mouth of the corpse. In art, where he was first depicted in an Attic vase dating from about 500 BCE, Charon was represented as a morose and grisly old man. Charon appears in Aristophanes' comedy Frogs, 406 BCE. Virgil portrayed him in Aeneid, Book 6, 1st century BCE. And he is a common character in the dialogues of Lucian, 2nd century CE. In Etruscan mythology, he is known as Charon? I don't know.
Chiron. Maybe that's
I don't know. It's spelled a little bit differently, but the way it's spelled, it looks like it's pronounced the same.
yeah.
And appeared as a death demon armed with a hammer. Okay. Eventually, he came to be regarded as the image of death and of the world below. As such, he survives in Charos or Charontus, the angel of death in modern Greek folklore. So he was basically like when you went to the Underworld, the first thing you'd see was Charon. He would be on this little boat and he'd ferry you across the River Styx, and you'd have to pay him the golden drachma, otherwise he wouldn't take you.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, so that was who Charon was, which I think that would be a really boring job for hundreds and thousands of years, just ferry back and forth across the River Styx. I personally would not be one of my favorite jobs. But I don't know. I guess he got to meet a lot of new people, but a lot of the times, like if you see him, like a picture of him, or read about him in a book, or see him in a movie or something, he is just this guy. He's usually like in a black coat, cloak, just kind of this tall, silent. He rarely says anything. I mean, I don't know. It's just kind of a somber dude.
The person she's kind of describing reminds me of like the Grim Reaper, like the one I've seen versions of that. I've seen the older books that have a version of him tall, lanky, and skeletal like, and he looks like he's pushing an Italian boat, which is called a gondola, and he's got this long stick, and he's pushing and coming back, and he's just gaunt and just drawn in, very skeletal, nothing to him, very kind of like how it said devilish, demonish looking, and just he just takes it as long as you give him his coin. He just pushes you along in the gondola kind of thing.
Yep.
Another thing, I don't know if you guys saw the post, but we posted yesterday. We have packets that go with today's mythology class. They are outside on the red cart. So we're talking about, going to the River Styx and going to the Underworld and all these things. We designed where you put on there where you could design your own coin to the Underworld to the give to Karon, however you want to pronounce it. So come by and pick those up. They'll be out there for probably another, a few more days.
Yeah.
At least till probably next week. I don't know if we'll have an activity for next week, but we will have those out there. So, and it's also for you parents out there and kids that like to cook. There are some actually Roman recipes I included on there. It's a really good, different kind of a sweet honey cheesecake. And it has basil, so it gives it a little bit more of a twist. And then there's a really good, baked roasted chicken recipe that, it's pretty common ingredients you can get down here at our local store, the dollar store, wherever. Even wherever you grocery shop, they should have a lot of those ingredients. So I thought that'd be a bonus for you guys. But come and pick those up, and you can design your own coin. There's a part; they're just round circles, so you can draw whatever you want on the front, and then it's got another option you can draw the back of it. So if you do that, let us know and post it and tag us on Facebook.
Yeah, so share it. We want to see your drachma designs.
Yes. So let's see what you would give to the ferryman. There we go. We can just use that. That's something we can run. The ferryman.
Okay.
For the River Styx.
Okay.
So the next part we're going to talk about is how the Romans loved their sports and how competitive. And then we'll do stories because we're doing pretty good on time today.
Yeah.
So we filled you guys up with lots of info. So let's get going. Okay. So the Romans loved bloody sports. The Romans referred to these as sports or contests as the game. So like the Olympics, this is where it started, the games. The Roman games are our basis for the Olympics every 4 years or summer, winter, whatever. This is where we got our start. Okay. So games were held in the sports stadiums that were built all over the Roman Empire. The sports stadium in Rome was called the Colosseum or the Flavian Amphitheater. At some events, men would fight fierce animals like lions and alligators. The more interesting and exotic these animals were to the ancient Romans, the more they liked the contest. So before combat, the animals were treated very badly. They were beaten or starved, so they would be especially mean. So the lions were probably beat and not given food for a few weeks on end, so that would agitate them. They would get them mean and a lot more aggressive. So the first thing you're going to see is something live and moving. You're going to be attacking it. So that's where they upped the ante a little bit. It made it a lot more aggressive and more entertaining for the bloodthirsty Romans, and they're competitive. So usually the men won, but sometimes the animals won, and the Romans found that especially exciting. But these fighters are not famous gladiators. They didn't get famous very often. The gladiators fought other gladiators. The fights were not like you see in the movies. In ancient Rome, the gladiator battle was not always or ever often to death. This does not mean the gladiator's life was easy. Their life was not easy at all. Some people chose to become gladiators. Others were slaves forced into the sport and usually found themselves the loser. Most gladiators were a little chubby, so they're little chunky monks. And although they were in excellent condition, they wanted extra body weight to help protect themselves when they were stabbed or hit. They were stabbed and hit a lot, but gladiators who won most of their matches were famous. So that's where it talks about, not many of them were famous because it was almost like it was fixed. Like it was a fixed fight. So they would want you to lose because if you lost, then that means, somebody died or
got hurt
got
or
hurt or
something.
something. They most likely didn't die all the time, but sometimes it was kind of fixed that way. So,
Yeah.
but gladiators who won most of their matches were famous. The crowds would cheer when they entered the arena. As time went on, the bloody fights became more organized. Gladiators were pitted against other gladiators their own size who had won a similar number of battles. This converted the sport into competitions. There were few women who were gladiators, and they fought other women. Referees were there to monitor a fight, so a referee could stop the fight at any time, and usually did when one gladiator was injured. Sometimes fight went on for quite a while. If the crowd got bored, the referee might call the fight a draw. If the emperor was in attendance, he might ask the crowd for a decision on whether or not to kill the loser, but people had their favorites. They wanted the gladiators alive so they could fight again another day. So, like, there is a movie, and it's got Joaquin Phoenix and Russell Crowe. It's called Gladiator. And there's a famous part where he's like, do you want the gladiator win? And so, like, he goes like this, Emperor goes like this, or this. So that was like, let him live or death. Like, that's a big famous scene from it.
Yeah.
And then Russell Crowe's like, do I not entertain? So there is your impression for the day. So that was a big to do. And, you know, our modern boxing, our modern sports, her and I have discussed this, you know, she cannot see how people can go and watch these kind of fights and kill people, you know, and there was killing, but it wasn't as much as it is blasted on TV. It's a lot of fantasy, historical fiction in a way.
Yeah.
Not all of them died. So her and I have discussed this a lot this week, and I'm like, I watch UFC fights every now and then, and I'm like, I can see the appeal to it, but, you know, as time went on with these gladiator fights in the Colosseum and different arenas, they would actually match them up like you're supposed to in your weight class and have referees. It wasn't just full-on anarchy. So that's something we've really discussed a lot this week.
We have, yeah. And some of the fighters, like not the gladiators, but some of the just regular fighters where they make them fight animals or something, sometimes those were like prisoners, like somebody...
Prisoners or slaves.
Yeah, so like maybe people had stolen something, or maybe somebody had killed somebody else, or something, and so that was a punishment that people would use. Sometimes they'd make a couple prisoners like fight each other, or sometimes they would just like have a bear or lion or whatever.
Or alligator. Apparently they got a alligator every now and then.
Yeah, I don't know, but. Yeah, the Romans really were, they were pretty cruel and vicious.
They could be, yeah.
They certainly loved their sports, but it's not my cup of tea, but they sure liked it.
I mean, they didn't have TV back then, so what else could you do? I mean, they had some books.
I could see doing a contest, like maybe an obstacle course kind of contest where nobody gets killed. That would be more entertaining to me.
I'm not pro killing somebody, but I can see in a way where, you know, we have our modern boxing, we have our just regular wrestling, or we have our summer wrestling is in winter. Sorry, guys. Anton, if you're watching, I know it's winter. All you wrestlers out there, it's winter. So that's just something. I like sports. She's not a huge sports fan, so there's a difference.
Yeah,
and it's okay.
I can see, but yeah.
Yeah, I'm not pro killing, trying to kill somebody, or necessarily animals killing, but there was nothing else to do. Okay, so we're going to talk about one of the famous gladiators. Like they said, not many got famous. And I think it's cool to mention that they did let women do some of this, which is really cool. Because women are super fierce and super awesome. You're welcome. So, Spartacus, Gladiator, and the slaves. Spartacus was a citizen of Rome, which means he was a free male. He joined the Roman legion when he was a teenager, but he really didn't like the life in the legion, so he deserted. Like most deserters, he was caught. The punishment for deserting the legion was to be sold into slavery. Spartacus was sold as a slave to a gladiator school to learn how to be a gladiator. Spartacus did not want to be a gladiator, or a slave, so he planned and executed an escape. Spartacus got the rest of the gladiators in the school to help him to escape with him. They took the weapons from the school and the knives from the kitchen and went to Mount Vesuvius, a volcano near Naples, Italy, which Pompeii and Mount Vesuvius. Okay, if you have not learned it yet, you probably will be soon. That's a big to-do in ancient history. Where they set up a camp. They also gathered in other escaped slaves. The Romans were terrified. At the time, there were more slaves than freemen living in and near Rome. The Romans were afraid that Spartacus would try to free all the slaves, so they sent an army after him. Spartacus and the other gladiators defeated the first Roman army, so the Romans sent a second army. Spartacus beat this one as well. While Rome was getting together a much larger army to send after Spartacus, Spartacus was gathering up runaway slaves and freeing other slaves from farms and villas. Spartacus gathered together about 100,000 slaves in just a couple of years. The Romans knew that they had to defeat Spartacus or they were doomed. They needed slaves to do much of the work in ancient Rome. They gathered together all the legions and they could from all over the empire and sent them after Spartacus. 4 years after he escaped, Spartacus and his army of free slaves were finally cornered and defeated by the Roman legion. The Romans sent a message to every slave in the empire by killing every slave who had joined Spartacus. So, like, that's pretty impressive for one
really
single
is.
man to gather up thousands of people, slaves at the time, to go against the Roman Empire and kind of like turn on his own kind in a way.
Yeah, that's pretty impressive.
That's insane. The next one I'm going to tell you about is the Colosseum. So where we were talking about the gladiator fights and the sports and the games, as they called them, this is where they were held, and this is still a standing place in Rome, and everybody wants to go see it. When you go to Rome, you go to see the Colosseum. That is like
I'd like to see it someday.
I would love to see it just for the historical reference, the fact that it's still standing after thousands of years.
Yeah. Especially with all the fights and whatnot that went on in there.
That'd be awesome. I mean, just imagine the history and all the stories. If that place could talk, it'd be amazing.
Yeah.
So the Colosseum was a sports stadium in ancient Rome. The definition of a Colosseum is any large sports stadium. The Colosseum was the name of the oval Colosseum or amphitheater in the center of the city of ancient Rome. The Colosseum is also known for Flavian Amphitheater. It was built about 1 AD by Emperor Vespasian. Excuse me. It is still the largest amphitheater or theater in the world. The Colosseum could not seat as many people as Circus Maximus, but it was very popular. The Colosseum had seats for about 45,000 people. So in that time, that's like your whole empire almost. Like, that's insane.
A lot of people.
To us, that's like a small concert venue. But to them, it's like there wasn't that many. But if you were not lucky enough to get a seat, there was also a standing section. When full, and it often was, it would hold 70,000 people. Okay, that's huge, even with standing. Admission to the Colosseum was free; anyone could attend. So that's like completely different from what we have today. Like whatever the concert place is called, Verizon, Ruoff, whatever. That's what it kind of reminds me of, except for you have to pay for your tickets. So lawn seats are anywhere from $30 to $75. And then if you get actual seating, then it's more expensive. But that's kind of the equivalent of you have your seats that you sit in by the stage, and then the ones that are in the lawn seats. So that's a big kind of interesting comparison, I think, in modern terms. The Colosseum was about as tall as a 12-story building is today, and you could fit an entire modern football field inside. There were 80 entrances to keep traffic flowing. People would come and go as their day allowed. Some people just nipped in for a quick peek, others spent the day and brought lunch. Free food was sometimes served. To protect people from the sun, an awning could be pulled over some of the seats. The Colosseum had many underground passages. This is where the animals and the criminals were held. There were many trapdoors in the arena used for special effect. It was quite the place. So it was like kind of a do-all. You don't see much about it being an amphitheater until you like really start reading into the details. So it was a multi-functional building, kind of like the arenas we have of today's time. The Colosseum was the site of the most gladiatorial contests. And in these contests, men fought other men or wild animals. To the Romans, seeing someone killed in the Colosseum was entertaining. The Romans eagerly went to the Colosseum to watch bloody battles. The Romans sometimes filled the Colosseum or flooded the water with the help to hold dangerous boat races. I didn't know that before I printed that off, which is really
Yeah,
cool.
that is kind of interesting.
um,
Makes me wonder how they did that. If there was like a river nearby or something. Because otherwise, that's a lot of hauling water.
I mean, there's not vehicles like modern field trucks during that time, so that's very interesting. Did they have a
Fire
water
brigade?
duct, or like a water duct or aqueduct that they just fed into the place, or
Yeah, I don't know.
maybe we'll have to research that and tell you guys more next week. Okay, so the Colosseum was built of concrete and stone and is still fairly intact even today. You can go to Rome and take tour of the Colosseum and imagine yourself in the audience or even as a gladiator in this famous sporting arena. I think the cool thing else that I had read is like it seems like they were really far ahead in their time in architecture wise, and that's why now even in modern times our government buildings are housing in anything. We have something from ancient Roman Greek architecture, and they had just mentioned in here like they could pull a cover over your head so you wouldn't get sunburned and be in the sun all day, which
Yeah,
is
that's pretty
amazing
genius.
to me. So yeah.
Okay, so I've got a couple stories for you guys today. We have about 10 minutes left, so we may be able to get through these. We'll see. The first one I'm going to read about is Pluto and the King. I had not heard this story before, and when I read it, I laughed. I thought it was pretty funny. If you guys will remember, Pluto was the god of the underworld. So he was like Hades for the Greeks, Pluto for the Romans. Okay. All right. The ancient Romans enjoyed a story about a clever king who once ruled the Greek city-state of Corinth. This story was originally told by the ancient Greeks. The Romans changed the story a little. They substituted two gods' names. The ancient Greeks called Zeus the king of all gods. When the ancient Romans told the story, they substituted Jupiter as the king of gods. The ancient Greeks said Hades was the god of the underworld, and the Romans said Pluto. But they left the story in ancient Greece. Greece was ruled by city-states. Rome was not composed of city-states. Excuse me. Rome was the center of the ancient Roman world. Rome had one government. Okay, so and then here's the story. Once upon a time, a long time ago, you might find this hard to believe, but Greece was not ruled by Rome. They had kings in charge of things. We Romans would never allow ourselves to be ruled by kings, not ever again. But this was long ago. Back then, a king ruled the city of Corinth. The people of Corinth thought he was the cleverest king who ever lived. They were always bragging about him. But the most clever thing that the king did, hardly anyone knew about, for a very good reason. One day, the king of Corinth was busy trying to come up with an idea to solve Corinth's freshwater problem. He was surprised to see Jupiter, who was Zeus, flying by. Zeus was holding something. The king could not quite make out what it was. How odd, said the king. It's rare to see Jupiter. He rarely leaves the heavens. I wonder what he's up to. The king shrugged and went back to worrying about Corinth's lack of water supply. The people of Corinth had no aqueducts, you see, or their problem would have been solved long ago. Soon another god flew by. Have you seen my daughter? He bellowed at the king. If you will give my city a source of fresh water, I will tell you what I saw, the king shouted back. And immediately a crystal clear stream of fresh water bubbled up. Well, there's that problem solved. Jupiter was carrying something. It may have been your daughter. He went that way, the king pointed. Jupiter did not allow mortals to interfere with his business. When he heard that the king had pointed him out to a lesser god, he told his brother Pluto, who was Hades, to take the king down to the underworld immediately. It's kind of a bum deal for the king.
Yeah.
When they tell you I am dead, do not put a gold coin under my tongue, the king whispered urgently to his wife. Being a good wife, she did exactly as the king had asked her. So if you remember, the gold coin or drachma was how you got into the underworld.
Yep.
The king was mortal, but still, he was king. Pluto himself met the king at the River Styx, the entrance to the underworld. Because no gold coin was placed under his tongue, the king arrived up the underworld to the entrance. At the entrance to the underworld, as poor as a beggar. Where's your gold coin? Pluto demanded to know. How can you pay for a trip across the River Styx and arrive in the underworld? The king hung his head in shame. My wife was too cheap to pay passage. Pluto's mouth fell open. You go right back there and teach that woman some manners. Pluto sent the king back to Earth immediately, where he was magically alive and well again. The king and his beloved wife laughed when he told her about it, but he never told anyone else. You never know when the gods might be listening. So that story cracked me up because the king basically outsmarted the gods. But yeah, that was pretty funny to me.
That was something like that's kind of rare because you always see like a human,
They're afraid
a
of
mortal. Yeah, a mortal would never go and coil against a god and win. So
Yeah.
it's pretty cool.
Yeah.
So
All right. Do you want to read one or do you want me to read?
let's see. I can read one.
Okay.
Let's see. What do we want to do? I think I want to talk about Pandora's box because there's a lot of reference still in modern times.
Yeah.
So one of the things when you let out a secret or gossip, it's kind of called like, oh, you open Pandora's box because all this stuff starts coming out that's not very good. So we're going to talk about Pandora's box real quick, and I think that'll do us for the day.
Probably. Yeah.
Probably. Okay, so Pandora's box, as the story goes. Once upon a time, a long time ago, there were two brothers named Epiphanes and Prometheus. They were good gods. They had good hearts. They were good friends. One day, Prometheus got into trouble with Zeus. So this is where it goes back and forth between Greek and Roman. So just bear with us. Angry over something or other, Zeus had declared that man did not deserve fire because he had a kind heart, and he knew how much man needed fire for food and warmth. Prometheus gave the man the secret of fire, even though Zeus had told all the gods not to do that. Zeus was furious that his order had been ignored. As punishment, Zeus chained Prometheus to a rock for many years. But that was not enough punishment. Not for Zeus. Once Prometheus was chained to the rock, Zeus went after Prometheus' brother, the gentle, kind-hearted Epiphanes. Zeus did not chain Epiphanes to a rock. Zeus had a sneaky punishment in mind. First, Zeus ordered the god's handyman, the maker of things, Hephaestus, to make Zeus a daughter. Hephaestus made a woman out of clay, a beautiful woman. He brought her to life and then brought her to Zeus. Zeus named his lovely new daughter Pandora. Zeus knew that Epiphanes was lonely. Zeus told Epiphanes that his brother Prometheus had to be punished, and that's why he was chained to a rock. But he felt sorry that this punishment left Epiphanes without company of his brother. That's why Zeus had decided to give Pandora in marriage to Epiphanes. It was not the truth, of course. Zeus wouldn't let anybody win. But then nearly everyone in the ancient Greek world knew better than to believe the mighty god Zeus. Epiphanes was kind-hearted and gentle and thoughtful, but he was no fool. He knew Zeus was coming up with something, but he loved Pandora at first sight. Zeus gave the newlyweds a gift. Some say it was a jar, some say it was a box. Whatever it was locked. It came with a note. The note said, "Do not open." Attached to the note was a key. It was all very curious. You can guess what happened next. It was Pandora whose curiosity got the better of her. One day, she used the key to open the box, and as she raised the lid, out flew all the bad things in the world today. Envy, sickness, hate, disease. All the bad things. Pandora slammed the lid closed, but it was too late. Epiphanes heard her weeping. He came running. Pandora opened the lid to show it was empty. Quickly, before she could slam the lid, one tiny bug flew out. He gave Pandora a big, buggy smile, and in thanks for his freedom, and flew away. That tiny bug was named Hope. And Hope made all the difference in the world.
So a lot of, the Romans and Greeks believed that this is when evil first came into the world, basically. Yep. So it's like they had all the bad things were locked up in this box. But then Pandora's curiosity got the better of her, and she opened it up, which I think it would be kind of hard because you'd be given this box as a present that says "Do not open." What kind of present is that? But it was Zeus.
Yeah, Zeus.
But then they did have hope. So even though there's all this bad stuff in the world, we do have hope. So yeah, I kind of like that story.
Yeah, it's kind of like Zeus going, "Haha, I've done this, and I know you're going to do this, but here's a little bitty bug to make it a little bit less severe." So he kind of had a heart to a point, but he was very "Don't mess with me, or I will get you back."
Yeah, he's not a very pleasant guy.
No. So yeah, I think that ends today.
So we have done a lot of talking. We finished up our Greek and Egyptian and Roman.
I know.
So I hope you guys have learned lots of things over the course of this. What's it been? 7 weeks?
7 weeks. It'll be 8 weeks total next week.
So I hope you guys have learned all sorts of fun stuff. But yeah, we've got one more week left, and that'll be kind of a review, and we'll figure out what we're going to do with that. So, like we said earlier, if you have any questions about that, feel free to ask us. But before I forget, I wanted to tell you guys the code word. So the code word this week is Mars, who was the god of war. Ares was his Greek counterpart. So once again, Mars. So just go ahead and enter that onto the website if you guys have signed up for summer reading. And if not, we'll see you guys next week.
All right. Bye,
Anything
guys.
else?
No, I think that's it.
Okay. You guys have a good week.